Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So from what we know, the Season 2 of Andor will basically pick up a year after the events of Marva's funeral on Ferrix. A lot will have changed. Now we know that Cassian Andor will be aiding Lieutenant Rael in helping the rebellion grow in size and strength. But what about poor Dedra Meero, who finished the season inside of a dusty tool shed thinking she was about to get violated by a crazy local, just to find out that it was actually Cyril Karn, her stalker. Talk about meet cute. Well, actually, this isn't the first time Cyril and Dedra have shared an uncomfortable conversation at really close proximity. Almost every one of their conversations is uncomfortable and at very close proximity. And hopefully it's not going to be the last conversation they have, because let's be honest, these two socially awkward weirdos were really made for each other. And more importantly, things on Ferrix went from kinda bad when Preox Morlana was in charge to a complete disaster when Dedra Meero was in charge. So what happens now? Will this big blunder end her otherwise stellar career? Well, let's take a look. But before we do that, a quick word from our sponsor for today, naivety.com. They have some awesome Black Friday deals which end tomorrow on November 30th. If you guys buy 2 of any of their lightsabers, you'll get $100 off automatically at checkout. And if you buy 3, you'll get $150 off your entire purchase. For those of you who just want one of these lightsabers, we still have our PORG promo code. That's PORG, all caps, and I'll give you 20% off during checkout. naivety.com has a great range of dueling sabers that are great for sparring and heavy use, along with more premium and unique saber hilts and designs that are packed with all sorts of functions and are beautiful to look at. Check out the description down below for more information about this offer. It's sponsors like naivety.com that allow us to present the type of content we want to without having to worry if the algorithm likes it or not. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. So let's go back in time a little bit. How did Dedra even get into this position in the first place? Well, in the beginning of the series, Dedra Meero is trying to connect a series of thefts from Imperial installations all together into one larger conspiracy.
Kessel, Fondor, targeting consoles from Jakku, proton warheads from Base K, the Steerguard Star Path.
Dedra Meero believed that a rebel network was slowly gathering in the shadows of the Empire's surveillance, and she believed that the Corpo incident on Ferrix was connected to all of this. But at the time, she had problems with jurisdictions, and she couldn't really access the files on Ferrix that she needed to prove that her theory was correct. The way the ISB was structured was that every supervisor had their own territory and sectors that they were in charge of, and Ferrix belonged to a sector overseen by Supervisor Blevin, who is one of the higher-ranking individuals within Major Partagas's group of ISB supervisors.
You have 2 sectors to supervise. Blevin is handling 6.
Blevin was a conformist, someone who adheres to the rules and was heavily focused on the internal office politics. He was essentially a bureaucrat, someone who prevails in times of peace and stability. He was good at filling out forms and reports, but not necessarily very skilled at critical thinking, investigating, and pursuing something a bit more complex like a galaxy-wide rebel network. And for one reason or another, when Dedra Meero goes to Blevin and asks for that report from Ferrix, he refuses to give it to her.
I want the full Ferrix report.
It's my sector.
An Imperial Star Path unit was stolen from the Steerguard Naval Yard and found at the scene. That gives me jurisdictional access.
You've been here, what, just over a year?
This is the kind of chicken shit behavior you see at a lot of nonprofits and government agencies, where a lack of financial incentives and probably poor leadership basically means that everyone in the office is not focused on their jobs. They're just focused on grabbing as much influence and power as they can, even though that power and influence is kind of meaningless.
You might want to steady the ladder before you start climbing.
I'm not looking for career advice.
You fall here, you fall alone.
Remember those words though, guys. That will go back to probably haunt Dedra Meero. Now, eventually the raid on Aldhani sparks a galaxy-wide reaction from Emperor Palpatine, and the ISB is basically given godlike powers to pursue the enemies of the Empire, and so Dedra Meero is able to skirt around Blevin's authority and directly request access to the records from the Ferrix incident. Armed with her new knowledge, she was able to create a convincing case for her rebel network theory, which she then uploaded onto HoloTube and got millions of views and likes, which is really awesome. No, I'm joking, but Major Partagas does reward Dedra Meero with Blevin's territory on Ferrix because of this report, allowing her to pursue her investigation without as much restraint. Although he does say this to her right after her victory.
Well played.
Thank you, sir.
Watch your back.
This is another warning that Dedra Meero, of course, chooses to ignore. You see, the ISB as an organization was not your typical intelligence agency. That would be the Imperial Military Intelligence Branch. The ISB was a part of Compnor, which means at its core it was politically aligned and loyal to Emperor Palpatine, making this organization a lot more like the Gestapo, KGB, and the Chinese MMS, rather than a national intelligence agency which is designed to protect the people and the nation and not just the political parties and people in charge. Authoritarian regimes generally use law and order as a justification for their overbearing tactics, heavy use of the security apparatuses of the state to crack down on dissidents and other undesirables. But the people who are enforcing these crackdowns, organizations like the ISB, they actually were usually not beholden to any rules or regulations, and there definitely weren't any checks and balances for these type of organizations. And so without any incentive to operate fairly, corruption and internal politics began to take over these bureaus. And everyone from Major Partagaz to Blevin had been warning Dedra Meero of this fact, and she again ignores it all. Like Thrawn, Dedra is a bit politically naive. Now, the Bureau does recruit very skilled and intelligent people. Dedra is a clear example of this. But loyalty to the Emperor is even more important than how competent someone is. Dedra Meero is very methodical and analytical when it comes to trying to find the truth and upholding the law, and this doesn't really fit into the ISB's way of doing things. And so when the PORD initiative is created, which involves a lot of collective punishment against the citizens of the Empire, Dedra Meero has her reservations.
We're playing straight into their hands.
Whose hands?
The rebels. This is exactly what they want.
We need them to overreact.
You can't be serious.
The Empire has been choking us so slowly, we're starting not to notice. The time has come to force their hand.
And so as you can see, Tony Gilroy is building this character that just doesn't really fit into the organization. Just like how Cyril Karn is really rebellious. We keep on talking about this. He doesn't really fit into the corporate structure or the Imperial Bureau of Statistics. These are both kind of outsiders caught in a weird position. And what's worse, Dedra Meero's success has basically made her into somewhat of a teacher's pet.
Prisoners? Not today.
Take a guess. Who's not happy about that?
She called in. He's been talking her down.
Dedra's developed somewhat of an ego. She's talking to Major Partagaz now as if she's an equal to him, and it's not the first time she's spoken a bit too plainly to the Major, like when she criticizes how sectors are divided amongst different supervisors.
Major Partagaz created those sectors.
Do you really think the rebels care about the lines we draw on maps?
You think the relevance of my work has been supplanted?
Systems either change or die.
Dedra Meero is obviously correct about her statement here. I mean, her argument is the same one that proponents of a federal police force before there was one in America made when criminals were just escaping over state borders and eluding local police. But once again, she's too rational and isn't spending the time to do some ass-kissing, which is politically necessary in these types of environments. And while I think Major Partagaz recognizes Dedra's skill and is for the time being willing to overlook some of her more rough qualities, Dedra actually adopts that same attitude with Colonel Wolf Yularen.
It's a large investment.
It's a fraction of the price of lost technology.
I'm pretty sure that's the first time that old sleepy Wolf Yularen has opened his eyes during this meeting, and that means he'll remember Dedra, which I'm sure is not a good thing. Now, that point of me showing you all of these interactions within the ISBs is just to show that, Dedra Meero has slowly distanced herself away from the rest of the ISB, which is not good, and she's also clearly pushed all her chips in on this one bet here. There's no side pot, no insurance. If she falls, she's gonna fall hard. And when the whole Ferrix situation goes really bad, someone is gonna need to be blamed in a ruthlessly political organization like the ISB. That someone right now looks like it's gonna be Dedra Meero. Major Partagaz might be willing to stick his neck out for her so that she can pursue her case, but right after the riot, she's pretty much toxic. I mean, up until Ferrix, Dedra had been doing an excellent job, right? Those compacts she requested so brashly from Wolf Yularen managed to pick up that secret antenna used by Bix to coordinate with Luthen Rael. She understood the situation well enough that when Marva Andor died, she took that as an opportunity to set up a trap for Cassian Andor, who she knew was going to return. But once again, she was perhaps a bit too arrogant and too reliant on her own judgment here. And so when Prefect Vanis Tigo informs Dedra that the people of Ferrix want to carry out a parade for a funeral,
they'll want to close Rick's Road. They'll ask for a permit. They know we won't allow it, but they like to keep asking.
We want a funeral.
Dedra seals her fate with those words. She wants to set up an ambush, a box in which the Empire can trap Andor in, which seems like a good idea at first glance. But if you actually think about it, it's a terrible idea. Law enforcement is always a lot harder when you introduce a bunch of very emotional, grieving people into the situation. They could have just set up surveillance over where Marva's brick would be placed, and that would have been that. But no, instead Dedra actually allows the residents of Ferrix to carry out that funeral. She doesn't even try to stop it. Although I'm not really sure the residents of Ferrix would have obeyed them, even if they said no permit. Dedra's background in law enforcement might help her track down criminals, but once again, I think she underestimates her military force's capabilities here. And Prefect Tigo seems like a rich Coruscanti kid with connections, and he doesn't really seem like a competent garrison commander, so he just goes along with everything.
Could I be made prefect? The title, I know it doesn't come with extra pay. You can wear a ball gown if you'd like.
I mean, this does provide her with a potential scapegoat, but again, at every step of the way, she made really bold decisions, which really turned out to be crucial errors.
Your control positions here, here, and here. We'll have snipers in a containment unit there.
Containment, yes. Snipers, no. I want him taken alive.
A sniper might have been able to identify Woman Pack out of that crowd, and they might have been able to take him out of action before he could throw that IED, which has turned the entire situation into a chaotic nightmare. Now, we as the audience are on Dedra's side because we've actually seen this rebel network she keeps talking about. We've seen how Cassian and Luthen are connected to everything from Steer Guard to the first incident on Ferrix to the Aldhani raid and the breakout on Arcana 5. But the bureaucrats and Imperial chiefs who view this incident will not see this at all. They'll see a young and inexperienced supervisor using unorthodox methods to control a funeral procession, which eventually turns into a full-on riot, which destabilizes the local region, cuts off industrial output and tax revenue from Ferrix, and on top of that, a number of Imperial military personnel and citizens have also died, and this generally causes a bunch of problems, which shows that the Empire's grip on the galaxy is steadily loosening. Even if Major Partagas for some unknown reason sticks his neck out still for Dedra Meero, no one else will. Blevin hates her. She took Ferrix away from him. Legret is a complete toady and hates how Dedra is shaking up things. And even Supervisor Jung, who's a rebel plant, probably would like to see someone as dangerous as Dedra be removed. And of course, if Sleepy Wolf Yularen remembers Dedra, he'll also remember that huge expensive surveillance package that she rudely ordered from him. My prediction is Dedra Meero is really screwed. I don't know if that means she's going to get fired completely or just reprimanded. But Cyril Karn definitely lucked out here. I mean, he was in the right place at the right time. Although he was also stalking her. I don't actually know what his success in this situation says about this series' message about stalking people. This is kind of classic Dan Gilroy. He's the screenwriter and brother of Tony Gilroy. He loves creepy and really weird characters. He's the guy behind Nightcrawler, a movie which featured a neurologically atypical and psychopathic sunken-eyed Jake Gyllenhaal, who actually looks a lot like Dedra Meero's attendant, if you ask me. But anyway, if Dedra Meero does get fired, she could still sleep over in her boyfriend's mom's apartment in the Undercity of Coruscant. Yes, that boyfriend. I, for one, would love to see the dynamics play out between Cyril Karn, Dedra Meero, and that Sith Lord of a mom he has. This could be the most uncomfortable thing we've seen in Star Wars since Padme took Anakin's breath away.
I can't breathe.